Holy words, long preserved for our walk in this world. They resound with God's own heart. Oh, let the ancient words impart.
Hello, dear friends. Elder Mrambiwa here. We're continuing our quarter 4 Bible study guide on lessons of faith from Joshua, quarter 2025. Today we're on lesson 8, titled Giants of Faith, Joshua and Caleb. So for Sabbath afternoon, dear friends, I encourage you to read for this week's study the following chapters and verses. Numbers chapter 13, verse 6, and from verse 30 to 32. Joshua chapter 14, from verse 6 to 14. Luke chapter 18, from verse 1 to 5. Joshua chapter 19, from verse 49 to 51. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18, and Romans chapter 12, from verse 1 to 2. Our memory text is coming from Hebrews chapter 13, verse 7, which says, "Remember your leaders, those who spoke to you the word of God. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith." Every parent knows that their children learn by their example, don't they? How many parents have fretted over seeing their children follow their bad traits instead of their good ones? Whatever our age, we find it easier to do wrong than to do right. It's just part of what it means to be fallen beings. For what do I ought to do that I do not practice, but that what I hate that I do? Romans chapter 7, verse 15. Who cannot relate? From birth, humans are shaped by the power of example. We learn to do the most basic things in life, such as walking, talking, and expressing our emotions by imitating those closest to us. As adults, we still need role models, and even if they are not perfect, we can admire and emulate those spiritual traits that made them giants of faith. So this week's study, we are going to take a deeper look into the personal examples of two giants of faith in the book of Joshua. This is Caleb and Joshua. What is it that made them stand out in their generation and play a key role in the life of God's people during one of the most crucial periods of Israel's history? This is a pertinent question we want to digest and dwell on as we are going to study this week's lesson for Sabbath, 22 November. So let's move on to Sunday. We have the subtopic faithfulness. So for this Sunday lesson, I encourage you to read the following chapters. Numbers chapter 13, verse 6, and from verse 30 to 32, and Joshua chapter 14, verse 6 and verse 14. So we have these questions. Who was Caleb? What was his place among the people of Israel? Let's digest and answer this question. The name of Caleb comes from the Hebrew word Caleb or dog, which occurs in the Old Testament always in a negative context. However, Caleb is used in extra biblical letters and hymns to express a servant's courage, tenacity, and faithfulness to his or her master. In this respect, Caleb was faithful to his name, demonstrating throughout his life unwavering loyalty to his Lord. So what does it say about Caleb that he was willing to speak his mind even though the majority of the spies had a completely different opinion and the people of Israel threatened him with death? See Numbers 14, verse 6 to 10, in from verse 21 to 25, in Numbers chapter 26, verse 65, in Numbers chapter 32, verse 12. So let's look at these verses and chapters for this to answer this question. So consider these important Israelite leaders, contemporaries of Joshua and Caleb: Shammua, Shaphat, Igal, Pauti, Gadiel, Gadi, Amiel, Setu, Nabi, and Geo. Do these names sound familiar? Probably not. Why? Because they are the names of the other 10 spies sent by Moses to explore the land of Canaan. They are forgotten because their names were not worthy of being remembered. The report that they brought portrayed the promised land as impossible to conquer. They saw themselves as grasshoppers compared to the giants who inhabited some areas of the land. and their hearts melted with fear at the impregnable walls of the fortified cities in Canaan. Caleb, one of the two spies who brought a positive report, takes the lead in presenting another possibility, the attitude of faith. He was willing to speak up for what he knew was right, despite the opposition, even in the face of potential death. And all the congregation said to stone them with stones, as given in Numbers chapter 14, verse 10. So I have this question that I want to pose to you, my dear listening friends. What do you do when most people around you seem to have a different opinion, one that goes contrary to your deepest convictions? This is a very pertinent question which you need to ponder upon. Let's move on to Monday. Word of this topic, this subtopic, give me this hill country. So let's read the following chapters and verses. Joshua chapter 14, verse 6 to 14. Numbers 14, verse 24. Numbers 32, verse 12. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 36. And Luke 6, verse 45. How would you describe Caleb and Joshua's attitude? What does it mean to follow the Lord fully? Caleb never forgot the promise the Lord had given him through Moses, that he would enter the land where his feet had trodden. Numbers 14, verse 24. 40 years later, he refers to his own report on the land as the word, as it was in my heart. Joshua 14, verse 7. His report was based on his conviction that with God's guidance and help, Israel would be able to conquer the land. In contrast to the report of the other 10 spies who inspired fear among the Israelites, Caleb manifested a wholehearted trust and commitment to the promise of the Lord. The Hebrew phrase, which literally means I was full after the Lord, Joshua 14, verse 8, is probably a short form of a longer idiom. My heart was fully following the Lord, or I filled my heart to walk behind or after the Lord. In contrast with others who walked after foreign gods and who did not follow the Lord fully, Caleb's heart was wholly dedicated to the Lord. Isn't it inspiring, dear friends? Truly a great lesson of faith we find in Caleb's heart. So the same expression is later repeated twice, emphasizing Caleb's faithfulness. See Joshua chapter 14, verse 9 and 14. His own characterization is in harmony with what the Lord himself called a different spirit, as given in Numbers 14, verse 24. That distinguished Caleb from the other 10 spies. Even at the age of 85, he continued to be an example of what the Lord can achieve through people whose hearts are fully dedicated to him and his cause. Caleb understood that the territory each tribe would eventually possess was directly proportionate to the extent to which they dared to claim the promise of the Lord and how much land they were willing to tread upon by faith. God's promises are not self-fulfilling in the sense that they come true irrespective of our will. Rather, they require faith accompanied by resolute action. The Hebrew term ulai, or maybe in English, Joshua chapter 14, verse 12, can express fear and doubt, but it usually denotes hope and the anticipation that something positive will take place, as given in Genesis chapter 16, verse 2, Numbers 22, verse 6 and 11, and Numbers 23, verse 3. So I want to pose this question to you, my dear listening friends, so that we might ponder upon it as we continue our lesson. What compromises, small compromises, are the kinds of things that can keep us from fully following the Lord? A powerful question, isn't it? Let's think this question and answer it personally in our hearts. So let's move on to Tuesday. We have the subtopic, the power of example. So let's read Joshua chapter 15, verse 16 to 19, Judges chapter 1, verse 13, and Judges chapter 3, from verse 7 to 11. So what does this story tell you about the power of example? How is Caleb's attitude being reproduced in the younger generation? In this passage, Caleb offers his daughter, Achsah, in marriage to one who conquers Debir. Othniel captures the city and wins the hand of Achsah. This story is important because once again, it reveals Caleb's courage, faith and readiness to take on challenges. It also shows that the next generation of Israelites followed the example of these giants of faith, Caleb and Joshua. As the older generations close their ministry, there's a new generation ready to face the challenges and continue to fulfill God's plan for Israel. In a way, that is not unlike Caleb's request to Joshua. Give me this your country. Asa, encouraged by husband, displays the same faith and resolution that her father demonstrated. Through determination and boldness, Asa continues the line of Caleb's example of the fulfillment of the promise to possess the land. Hmm. So, in other words, dear friends, women and girls can be powerful examples of faith if they follow the good examples of their fathers. So we need to be exemplary to our daughters and also our sons. Indeed, the land is a gift from Yahweh, Israel. But Israel must appropriate it by claiming the promises of the Lord with faith and courage. Acts as determination foreshadows the perseverance of those women in the Gospels who would not be turned away by the crowd or the disciples, and would not give up until they received Jesus' blessing for themselves and their families. A powerful example from ladies that women can follow. So read Luke chapter 18, verse 1 to 5. So what lesson is here for us? Passing on the torch of faith to the next generation is crucial to the fulfillment of the mission of God God has entrusted to us. Think about the challenges of passing on faith to the next generation on the one hand, and about the opportunities for young people to assume more responsibility in the work of God on the other. What can we do to facilitate and train young people or youth to assume godly leadership? How crucial is our example in this process? Dear elders, dear doctors, we need to be exemplary to our youth so that they feel in the leadership roles when we pass on the stage of action in working for the Lord. Let's move on to Wednesday. We have the subtopic Humble Hero. The long list of place names which constituted landmarks on the borders of the territories assigned to the tribes of Israel are bookended by the report of land allocation to the two heroes, Caleb and Joshua, of the first reconnoiter. Caleb received his inheritance first, while Joshua received his last. Up to this point, Joshua allocated the land to the tribes of Israel. Now it is time for the people of Israel to give Joshua his inheritance. Read Joshua chapter 19 from verse 49 to 51. So let's answer this question. What are the implications of the fact that the great leader of Israel who apportioned the land receives his inheritance last? Hapana makaro kapa na Mwari. Making others what? First as a leader. The city that Joshua receives is Timnath Serah, a name composed of two words. The first Timnath derives from a verb manna, whose meaning is to count or to assign, and it means portion or territory. The second word can be derived from a Hebrew word, verb serach, and it means excess or leftover. We can compare this with Exodus chapter 26, verse 12. The name of Joshua's city can be translated as leftover portion or the remaining territory. Remnant. The name of the city that Joshua is chosen from what was left testifies to the noble character of Israel's second leader. First of all, he waited until all the people received their portion. Then Joshua did not choose one of the densely populated territories of the land or the most impressive cities as his inheritance, but a modest city, or perhaps the ruins of it, in order to rebuild it with arduous work. You can compare this with Joshua chapter 19, verse 50. Moreover, Timnath Serah was located near Shiloh, in the vicinity of the sanctuary, which was where Joshua's priorities lay and where his heart was bound. Certainly, after the newly born nation of Israel had been led into the promised land, and with God's help secured the inheritance of each tribe and family, it would not have objected to Joshua's demand for a more impressive inheritance. Yet, Joshua was content to live a simple life with a focus on what is important, thus embodying prayer expressed later by David. One thing I have desired of the Lord, that I will seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and inquire in his temple. Psalm 27, verse 4. So this example of Joshua, it reminds me of country living and homeschooling, which we are called as God's people to do. Hmm. So what lessons can you draw for yourself regarding Joshua's attitude? How might you apply it to yourself now? Hmm. A pertinent question which you need to digest, my dear listening friends. So let's move on to Thursday. We have the subtopic changed by contemplation. Contemplating the life example of great heroes of faith is essential for our spiritual growth. At the same time, our ultimate example is Jesus Christ, his life and teachings. How does focusing on the life of Jesus change us? See Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 to 2, and 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18. Marco Lacoboni, a neuroscientist at the University of California, Los Angeles, researched the function of mirror neurons. These small cell circuits are activated both when we perform a certain action, such as laughing or embracing someone, and when we observe someone else performing the same action. The activity of these neurons reduces the distinction between seeing and doing. Ellen G. White speaks about the importance of beholding the character of Jesus. She says, open quote, looking unto Jesus, we obtain brighter and more distinct views of God, and by beholding we become changed. Goodness, love for fellow men becomes our natural instincts. We develop a character which is the counterpart of the divine character. Going into his likeness, we enlarge our capacity for knowing God. More and more, we enter into fellowship with the heavenly world, and we continually increase in power to receive the riches of the knowledge and wisdom of eternity. Close quote. Ellen G. White, Christ Object Lessons, page 355. So, dear friends, let's read Romans chapter 12 from verse 1 to 2. What two processes work for conflicting purposes in our lives? How can we be sure that we give room to the right one? In the summary chapter of his epistle to the Romans, the Apostle Paul speaks about two antagonistic forces trying to shape our lives. On the one hand, the surrounding world, with its various influences, tries to force us daily into its own mold, effecting a conformation in us that works from the outside in. To counteract this impact, the Holy Spirit is able to transform us inside out in a manner similar to the way a caterpillar metamorphosizes into a beautiful butterfly. The concept of metamorphosis is here given in Romans chapter 12, verse 1 to 2, when Paul says, be not conformed, but be transformed. So, but for that process to happen, we need to consecrate ourselves to God and ask Him to continue the good work that He has started in us. See Philippians chapter 1, verse 6. In the end, we have to make the conscious choice, moment by moment, to walk in the Spirit. Are you there, dear friends? By beholding Christ, we become transformed daily into His image, and have this Christ-like character in us. So let's conclude our lesson. Ellen White says, Caleb's faith now was just what it was when his testimony had contradicted the evil report of the spies. He had believed God's promise that he would put his people in possession of Canaan, and in this he had followed the Lord fully. He had endured with his people the long wandering in the wilderness, thus sharing the disappointments and burdens of the guilty. Yet he made no complaint of this, but exalted the mercy of God that had preserved him in the wilderness when his brethren were cut off. Amid all the hardships, perils, and plagues of the desert wanderings, and during the years of warfare since entering Canaan, the Lord had preserved him. And now, at upwards of fourscore, his vigor was unabated. He did not ask for himself a land already conquered, but the place which above all others the spies had thought it impossible to subdue. By the help of God, he would wrest his stronghold from the very giants whose power had staggered the faith of Israel. It was not desire for honor or aggrandizement that prompted Caleb's request. The brave old warrior was desirous of giving to the people an example that would honor God and encourage the tribes fully to subdue the land which their fathers had deemed unconquerable. Ellen G. White, Patriarchs and Prophets, page 512 to page 513. Also, Ellen White says, it was Caleb's faith in God that gave him courage, that kept him from the fear of men and enabled him to stand boldly and unflinchingly in the defense of the right. Through reliance on the same power, the mighty general of the armies of heaven, every true soldier of the cross may receive strength, courage to overcome the obstacles that seem insurmountable. Ellen G. White, The Advent Review and Sabbath Herald, 30 May 1912. So, dear friends, I want to pose the following discussion questions which are going to enrich our lesson. So, dear friends, I want you to discuss the power of peer pressure and the courage it takes to speak up when others do not. What is the role of courage in practicing our faith? How can we avoid being rude while we stand for what we believe is right? So, share in your class, in your peers, wherever you are, some examples of faith from your church or community or where you live that shaped your life, even your workplace that shaped your life and character. What are the traits of these people that are worth following? Think about and discuss the influence media has on our lives. I'm glad we even have Mwerahari Media, and I hope it is influencing many people for good. How can we avoid its negative effect or harnessing its potential for good purposes? So, dear friends, reflect more on the humility of Joshua as a leader and his desire to live close to the sanctuary. In what ways does this example speak to you? Thank you so much, dear viewers and listening friends. May God bless you. Lessons of faith from the book of Joshua. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. By so doing, you're going to increase the algorithm of our videos that we're posting on our channel. And more people are going to hear this gospel, to hear these presentations, and the gospel will be preached unto all the age in our generation. So, dear friends, do the work of an evangelist. Thank you so much. God bless you. Amen.
Holy words, long preserved.